Hi, this is Eli Kranzberg, and welcome to this series on the new version of Philharmonic. Now, this is a fantastic orchestral instrument that does a lot, and it's got a great user interface that allows for ease of use. I love the new key switching features. There's great patterns to use. We're going to go through it all in these videos. And to get started, I want to take a look around the interface in this video. Now, first thing to understand is that Miroslav Philharmonic 2 is a multi-timbral instrument. We can have up to 16 parts playing together. Now, these can be used for different types of instruments on each part, or similar or same instruments with different articulations. Now, we have the Play tab up here, and that's what we're viewing now. And this is used with the browser on the left to load instruments, and we can also load patterns if we click here, and those are phrases that'll play in addition to the instrument that's loaded in. We even have a live mode where we can save and store multis and then call them up via MIDI messages, and we can load multis, the entire state of an instance of Philharmonic. But let's go in here and just burrow in. I'll go to a solo instrument and load in the violin multi. I'm just going to double click, and that's loading it into the first slot on MIDI channel 1. So this Play tab is very useful for basic operations. We can adjust the volume, the pan, and even adjust the MIDI channel and solo and mute the different parts. Now the Mix tab is like a console style interface. Looks like a mixer. We have 5 insert effects for each instrument, and by default, here's an EQ compressor that's instantiated there. We have 4 effects sends, and we can have returns where we have effects returns for things like reverb. And there's even a master output where we can add additional processing to affect the entire state of the multi. We can assign discrete outputs for each of the parts. If we're using it in our DAW and we run a route to multiple outputs. And we can play the sound, and you'll see some activity here. Now we have the Edit tab, and this is synth-style programming parameters, which are of limited use to orchestral instruments for sort of a natural, realistic style processing. But if you want to get creative and esoteric, we can get some really interesting effects on the instruments here using things like LFOs and filters, modulating different parameters. We have envelope controls. And we can also set some basic parameters for the instruments, like the number of notes that'll sound the polyphony. We can transpose them, set keynote ranges, and we can set zones in here. We're going to look at it all in detail. Now, we also have on the bottom, let me just go to the Play tab, but this is available on all 3 of the tabs. On the bottom, we have this panel here, which toggles between macro and effects. Now, when we're in macro mode, we have 8 controls for quick access to the most commonly used parameters. So you don't need to dig into the edit. You can edit, for example, the attack and the release or the cutoff here, the important parameters to shape the overall character of the sound. And that's unique for each sound that's loaded in. Now, the Effects tab lets you select and view the 5 insert effect slots over here. And we can call up the different effects, and we can see then edit the parameters for each effect. For example, here's the EQ comp, and we have the controls over here. We can turn it off. I can go to the second effect slot, and maybe I'll put something else in. Let's try something a little bit esoteric, maybe this one. And if we look in the Mix tab, we'll see here there's that second effect, and I can click there and empty it and get rid of that, and it'll be gone here now. So that's for the effects for quick access here. And we also have controls on the top and the bottom that are sort of global to the whole instrument. We have the shopping cart icon here, which will call up the IK Multimedia Store if you want to add expansion packs on. We have a settings window here, and this is unique to the standalone mode, which is what we're working in now, and I'll work probably in a DAW for most of these videos, but let's look at this. We can set up in the preferences over here the pathway to where your samples are, and I have mine loaded on a separate drive. So you just browse and show where you want it to point to, and that's how you can identify where it'll find the samples. The MIDI latch patterns for when we're playing the patterns, if you want to press a keynote to trigger the pattern and then remove your finger, latch mode, when this is on, means that it'll stay activated until you hit the note again, versus when it's off, you need to keep your finger held down on the note. We can set the audio MIDI settings here, and again, this is only for standalone mode, which audio device you want it to use, which outputs, sample rate, audio buffer size, which MIDI interface, etc. And there's even some remote settings for triggering via MIDI messages, things like scrolling the list and browsing and selecting specific parts, etc. Now, we also have an info button over here, and that'll just bring up a splash screen, and then the authorization button for entering your serial number. On the bottom, we have a Learn button, and this is great for simple MIDI control. Like, for example, I have an Ovation Impulse keyboard controller. I'm going to, let's say, adjust the volume here. I'll click that, and now move my knob. So now it's controlling the volume as I turn my knob. Very simple and intuitive to use. We have a control button over here, which brings up all these MIDI assignments, and we can edit them. These are the default assignments for the macros, and here's the one I just added, volume 28, and I can just select that one and remove it if I want. It's very simple management of MIDI assignments. We have a panic button over here in case there's a stuck note. It'll stop playback. The sync button, when we're within a DAW, will sync to the DAW's tempo. It's inactive now. Here we just set the tempo in this field over here by typing in whatever we want like that. We have a key match control, and this is great to globally transpose all the patterns that you may have loaded in into the different parts, and they'll all play back in the same key. We can also set it uniquely for each of the parts, but this is a global sort of way of doing it. So I'll load one in just to show you an example. Let's put this in, and I'll hit the play button here. Hit it again to stop, and I can maybe transpose it now to G. I can go to any key I want. So that's the idea. You combine these patterns with live playing with the sounds that's loaded in. We also have a computer keyboard keys button over here. And again, this is only standalone mode, and we can use our QWERTY keyboard to actually play the sounds. And this gives us a legend of what's going to trigger on each of the keys. And we have a CPU monitor for monitoring the activity, and we have some commands in the middle here. Let me go to instrument. We have some preset management here where we can save, rename, delete the different instruments and settings. An info button will bring up info on what's loaded in. For example, this violin, it tells us how much memory it takes, what the macros are assigned to, and information about how it's mapped, etc. And I'll just click it to close it. And we have a search button here. Let's say I type in violins. It'll return all the violins. So we can use that to search the browser here rather than just linearly going through the sections. We have a refresh button here to refresh the library if you've made any changes to where the samples are stored. So that's the big picture of the overview of the interface, and we're going to dig in and start with the play window in the next video.